and getting our live stream settled in so that we can start also with our family who's watching on live stream and getting all of that organized as well. And I think okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started now. We're putting everyone on mute so that we can hear the speakers, and also there'll be a time for questions and answers at the end of the call. But it would be good if everyone was on mute so that we have the best opportunity to ensure good connectivity and sound for all of our speakers. Welcome, and my name is Osprey Oriole Lake, and I am the Executive Director of the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network. And I'm calling in right now from coastal Miwok territory in California. And we really always like to acknowledge the lands where we stand, and I think it's a really good practice for all of us to really recognize Indigenous people wherever we live. This is a call where we're going to be focusing on Indigenous women on the front lines, defending communities, and the Amazon. And we really wanted to take this opportunity to hear from our sisters who are in, as we all are, a really serious crisis situation with the global pandemic that is going on right now. And on top of that, we also have issues concerning the ongoing climate crisis. The climate crisis didn't go away, and all the issues of deforestation and different forms of climate destabilization because of COVID-19. So we're really linking those issues up today as well. And today's webinar is part of an ongoing series by the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network. It's a series called A Just and Healthy World is Possible. And we wanted to really have a way to connect with all of you and to have us not be alone at this time when we are sheltering in place, and to reach out and create community with all of you, to let you know that we're thinking of you, that we care about your health, we care about your communities, we care about how we are going to use this time to create a new reality after this very serious pandemic. And we've been forced into our homes to really rethink and reset what we want to do and what kind of world we want to build going forward. We have a lot of different programs that we can, and we really welcome you to go to our website to learn more about what we're doing. We have programs around climate justice policy, really highlighting a gender lens, divestment from fossil fuels, working on food sovereignty. But today, we really want to focus on our program on Women for Forests. And we're working in 3 different regions, one of them being the Amazon. And I don't think there could be a more important time for us to be protecting forests as we have today. And of course, as you know, we're going to be focusing specifically on Ecuador and Brazil. And the communities there, the Indigenous communities there are, as I said, facing the deadly coronavirus pandemic, but also a lot of climate change issues in their communities and attacks on their communities due to our systems of oppression. So yeah, before we go further and take a deep dive, I just want to say again that you know, while we're all dealing with our own crises, it's really important to also remember that we're connected to many regions of the world, and to connect all of our different struggles together. I know a lot of you are facing perhaps health issues of your own, or have lost a loved one recently and may be grieving. People are losing their jobs. People are really struggling to have food. People are, you know, having a way to have water in their communities. We keep hearing, you know, this, the need that we all need to be washing our hands, but, you know, some communities don't even have clean water or soap to wash their hands. So there's a variety of manners in which folks are struggling. And, you know, I really want to acknowledge that as we move forward into this call, and to also know that we know that it's even that due to injustices because of our institutionalized patriarchy and colonization and racism and capitalism, all of these systems of oppression mean that how the impacts are affecting people are not even, and there's a lot of injustice that we need to really address at this time. You know, we've been having these calls. I also have been doing every time a real shout out to all of those on the front lines, all the grocery workers, all the farmers, all the people moving food around the world, the nurses, the doctors, all who are really keeping our communities going. And it's a very challenging time for them. They are on the front lines having to face this pandemic and a lot of illness, and many times without the proper equipment. And it's completely outrageous that we are sending you know, doctors and nurses and grocery store workers to go into these workplaces without the proper protective gear. And it's something that we're really working on. We can to change that dynamic and to really confront governments on their lack of attention to the people who keep our world going. And there's a lot of campaigns around not bailing out the banks, not bailing out these big industries, and having the money go to the people and not to industry and not to the corporations. This can't be a time where we are bailing out those at the top 1% and not the people. So thank you for joining us today. And I want to now go ahead and introduce our truly remarkable speakers. They are leaders that I deeply love, admire, and respect. And we have their full bios on our website because we wanted to, you know, have time to really jump into the conversation with them, but I really encourage you to go to our website to learn more about them. But I'm going to give you a brief introduction to each of them, and we want to thank them because we know that they are all very busy women, and it's a very full time. So I wanted to thank you all, especially the speakers, for taking time with us today, and again to welcome all of you who are taking your time to participate in this conference. We have over 400 people on this webinar, and I know there's a lot of leaders on this call. I want to acknowledge all of you as well and the incredible work that you're doing in your own communities. So I'm going to be introducing the speakers in the order that they will be presenting. And again, just to mention that they will all be making their presentations, and then at the end, we're going to open up time for questions, and people can put their questions in the chat, and then we'll be referring those questions back to the presenters. So our first speaker is going to be Sônia Guajajara. She's an Indigenous leader from Brazil. She's the executive coordinator for the Articulation of Indigenous Peoples of Brazil. And we're very fortunate to have a translation by Maria Paula, who's the founder of the NGO A Drop in the Ocean. So Sônia will be speaking, and then Maria will be translating from Portuguese into English for us. Then we'll be hearing from Daiara Tukano. She's an Indigenous activist from Brazil. She's an independent communicator and coordinator of Radio Yandê, and she'll be speaking to us also about Brazil. So the first two speakers are going to be really giving us a Brazilian context. And then we will be hearing from Patricia Kalinga. She's a Kichwa leader from Sarayaku in Ecuador, and she's a leader and spokeswoman for Amazon Women in Defense of the Jungle. And then we will be hearing from, lastly, Helena Gualinga. She's a 17-year-old social activist of Kichwa-indigenous and Swedish origin from Sarayaku, Ecuador. And so we're very excited to have these four women leaders speak to us. And as we go, just wanted to let folks know that we are going to be dropping into the chat a lot of links that the women are going to be talking about, a lot of the links that can be petitions that you can sign, ways to directly fund these women, ways to directly follow them online. So there's going to be information that we're talking about, but also a lot of resources that we share in the chat. And after each webinar, we collect all of these resources and put them into a file that we upload into our social media and into our newsletters. So if you don't catch it this time, I don't want you to be concerned. There'll be a way for you to hear about all of these resources and get a hold of them online afterwards. But we really want you to be supporting the women and their work and their communities. Before I bring Sônia on to speak, I just wanted to make a few other comments to contextualize really the urgency of what's happening in the Amazon. and our commitment to what is happening to our sisters and brothers there. I think it's really critical that, as I mentioned, we stay aware of the crises in our own home communities, but also what's happening from around the world. And even before the COVID pandemic, we were very concerned and have been working for years in the Amazon with many, many other groups because of the climate crisis and deforestation and mining and extraction in the Amazon rainforest. But now we need to realize that this threat is very devastating, and we're going to be hearing from the women about how the coronavirus pandemic is impacting their communities. And there could just not be a more important time that we stand with them. They're facing, in addition to this pandemic, ongoing deforestation, oil extraction, mining, and indigenous rights violations in their territories. And we need to also highlight, as I mentioned earlier on, that it's not even. Indigenous rights are very important, and the protection of indigenous peoples, because they're at a higher risk of contracting this virus due to a lack of resources and health disparities brought on by centuries of colonial practices and environmental racism. And of course, when these urgent times come, these cracks in the systems and these injustices get really amplified. So it makes it even more difficult for them to have the resources that they need. So, we all hear that, we are all in this pandemic together. We're all in this climate crisis together. Let's be really clear and honest that it's not even, and we need to really uplift and center the voices of indigenous people and brown and Black communities and those on the front lines. The other piece I wanted to mention is that scientists have stated that destroyed and diminishing natural habitats actually create the conditions for this animal-human virus crossover, such as COVID-19. So we know that the origins of COVID-19 come from the animal world. Scientists are still working to identify exactly where and how that happened and which animal, but we definitely know it's because humans are moving further and further into wild habitat where we should not be. Mother Earth is clearly letting us know, and has been for quite some time, that we have crossed that boundary with the wild. We have gone too far. And indigenous peoples have been warning us for a very long time to protect the places of the wild, to protect biodiversity, to protect the sacred lands of the Amazon and many other wild places around the world. And so we need to understand that if we want to prevent further pandemics, we also must understand that protecting the Amazon is a part of that. And we need to step back from stepping over that line of crossing the wild and using up so much habitat. So this is also part of the message from Mother Earth and from our indigenous sisters and brothers as well. And we need to protect the Amazon first and foremost, because indigenous people have the right to live in their traditional ways in their own territories. But this is also a fight for all of us, and we need to support this work that they are going to be sharing with us. WeCan is part of also the Stop the Money Pipeline Coalition, and we're targeting financial institutions like BlackRock and banks to say no more to these companies, these corporations who are financing deforestation, and banks that are financing companies that are extracting fossil fuels and violating rights. So this is another link we're going to be sharing in the chat section, is more about Stop the Money Pipeline campaign and a lot of this divestment work and defunding work to stop deforestation and extraction. There's one other initiative I want to mention before we bring Sônia on, which is an initiative that Indigenous people are leading and our allies at Amazon Watch. I think some of the leadership of Amazon Watch is on this call with us today. We welcome you, and they're really helping push out initiative of a growing coalition of international NGOs, including WeCan, in partnership with the leadership of Indigenous organizations, calling for an Amazon-wide moratorium at this time of the COVID pandemic. And this is to support Indigenous peoples and their demands for a moratorium on any activity that includes the entering of foreign persons into their territories. Obviously, if people come into their territories, they can bring this illness, and we don't want that. And this includes all extractive industries and their activities, industrial agriculture, and increased militarization on indigenous territories. We don't want any of these things, and we really encourage you to support this initiative, and we will again be sharing that in a link and in a follow-up document for all of you to have. And I'm sure our presenters will be talking about this initiative. Also, very recently, there has been, on top of all of this, 2 floods in the community of Sarayaku, where Patricia and Helena are 2 speakers. That is their community. So they've been also suffering a great deal of hardship due to climate-related flooding in their community. So this is a very dire situation, and I think we need to not make light of it and jump into really discussing, the challenges of what's happening in the Amazon, and also the solutions and the depth of knowledge that these women hold. It's a critical time to stand with Indigenous women leaders and learn from both their resistance efforts, but also their essential healing knowledge, their traditional ecological knowledge. I know they have a lot to share about their immediate needs, but also their vision for living in respect and well-being with Mother Earth. And Indigenous people have so much knowledge that we need to learn from, especially Indigenous women leaders, around our relationship to the natural world and how we can live in harmony with our relatives that are non-human. So with that, I'm very, very honored to have Sônia Guajajara speak to us with the translation of Maria Paula. So I hand the floor over to you now to Sônia. And again, please keep looking for all of the links in the chat, which can help directly fund these women and their organizations and their efforts on the ground in the Amazon. Thank you, Sônia, for joining us. And let's make sure, Catherine, that she's unmuted. Thank you.
Ok, olá, boa tarde.
Hello, hello.
Todos. Obrigada, Osprey, por esse espaço, essa conexão entre nós, para a gente saber o que está acontecendo com todas nós, o que todo mundo está fazendo nas suas regiões.
Maria, can you go ahead and translate? Maria, you'll need to be off mute.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, so she said, thank you so much, Osprey. It's wonderful to know that the international community is aware of what's going on here and willing to help us to come in aid for our struggle in this point.
Nós indígenas, a gente sempre lutou por uma sobrevivência. E em tempos de pandemia não se faz diferente, e que não é novidade para a gente, porque nossos povos já viveram, já sofreram muitos extermínios, por conta de várias outras epidemias.
We indigenous people have always had struggled and being survivals, struggling to survive. So this is not something new for us, as we have always been facing great challenges.
Maria, can you please tell Sônia to turn her phone off just for this time because it's creating feedback?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Can you please tell Sônia to please turn off her phone, her telephone, not the just the telephone, because it's creating feedback noise?
Because the telephone, I'm translating for her by the telephone. Yeah, that's why, because otherwise she can't understand. Okay.
During the time she's talking, just during the time she's talking.
Okay. Soninha, enquanto você estiver falando, bota no mudo o telefone para que eles, porque tá dando interferência, entendeu? Então na hora que você for falar, você bota no mudo.
And then she can turn it back on when you're done.
E depois você pode botar junto. Ok, she'll do that.
Bom, então a gente está num momento assim aqui de enfrentar muita dificuldade, porque embora os números no Brasil estão cada dia mais alarmantes, né, os povos indígenas continuam invisibilizados e totalmente abandonados pelas medidas adotadas pelo governo.
So it's very hard time for us. We're facing great difficulties as the numbers in Brazil are really outrageous, very, very big numbers, but still the indigenous people keep invisible.
O coronavírus nos coloca numa nova situação de alerta, onde é preciso focar nos
coronavirus, the COVID.
Onde é preciso focar nos cuidados, nas medidas de prevenção que têm que ser adotadas, mas também não se pode invisibilizar todas as situações históricas crônicas de ataques, de violências e de invasões nos territórios indígenas.
So we are in this place right now that we can, of course, focus at the prevention and taking care of the COVID-19, but we cannot forget the historical attack that we have been victims of. And so we need to address issues that are a chronicle struggle for the indigenous people as well as the temporary COVID-19 issues.
Nós temos algumas situações aqui que precisam ser observadas e que nós estamos fazendo uma pressão, né, para que os órgãos responsáveis assumam que, a Secretaria Especial de Saúde Indígena não está considerando ou atendendo os indígenas que estão em contexto urbano, né? Está contabilizando somente os indígenas que estão nas aldeias.
So there are some situations that we need to face. Number one is that the special secretary for the indigenous health is not counting the number of indigenous people that have been contaminated when they are in urban areas. So whenever... Pode falar, Sônia.
Até agora já se somam 5 óbitos, né, entre indígenas, e o movimento indígena já está contabilizando 5, porque a gente está acompanhando todos os estados, mas a CESAI só está apresentando 3 óbitos.
So right now, we indigenous associations know that we had 5 cases of death. 5 indigenous people have already died from the COVID-19, although the official number for the government is 3 people. So they are not counting the people who are in urban areas, the indigenous people who are in urban areas.
A falta dos testes, a falta dos testes rápidos, né, também tem deixado, né, muitos, assim, registrado alta subnotificação. Pessoas que estão contaminadas, mas que não conseguem, né, não conseguem saber e nem se prevenir para evitar o contágio, porque não tem essa confirmação.
And also, we have no tests. So many people are already contaminated at the indigenous areas, but we cannot make sure because we cannot test, and we cannot really know that they are contaminated. So we need tests.
E aqui um risco muito grande é exatamente o comportamento do presidente, que vai na contramão de tudo que é feito, né, para tomar as medidas preventivas. Então, uma fala da autoridade máxima do país dizendo que não é perigoso atrapalha muito todas as medidas que vêm sendo adotadas, né? E aí, nesse sentido, para toda a população.
The risk that we are facing is getting bigger and bigger, not only for the indigenous people, but also for the whole population of the country, as we have the person who the speaker's person, the president of the country, showing behavior that is not facing the situation as it should. So he says that it's not something grave, that is just, a little flu. And so this makes things even worse for everyone.
Bom, e o ministro da Saúde, que era quem estava dando aí o comando, né, acaba de ser demitido.
And the health minister of the country, who was someone that was being the commander in the whole situation, had been fired a couple of minutes ago. He'd just been fired because he was opposing to the behavior of the president.
E é importante ressaltar aqui o aumento do desmatamento, né, na Amazônia. Em 30 dias, né, durante todo o mês de março, aí, que se considerou o isolamento social, houve um aumento de 29,30% do desmatamento na Amazônia.
And although the attention of the world is going to the pandemic, the increasing of deforestation is going amazingly high. So in 30 days, only in March, the numbers of deforestation are 29.30% higher than it was before.
Aumento considerável também de garimpeiros ilegais.
And also illegal mining in our actions are happening, and it's increasing a lot right now.
E o Ministério de Minas e Energias agora anunciou uma portaria, que é a portaria 135, que considera a atividade de mineração como atividade essencial em tempos de pandemia. Então, vai totalmente na contramão do que é preciso ser feito para garantir o isolamento.
And the Ministry of Energy of Brazil, they just made a new law, the number 135, that they say that mining is now something very important to help the pandemic and the whole crisis situation. So instead of protecting and preventing the contamination among the indigenous people, they are saying that it's all right to go ahead and mine, which makes everything even more difficult.
Então, para nós é um desafio gigante conter, né, combater o coronavírus e também pressionar, né, para retirar esses invasores que são grandes vetores de contaminação dentro das aldeias.
So for us, it's a great challenge because we have to make pressure to the government, to the international, and we ask for international community to help us, because when they allowed the mining to go inside of the indigenous protected land, they are allowing the increase of contamination, because they are the ones who are bringing in the virus to the indigenous peoples.
O coronavírus para nós representa, né, o perigo de novo genocídio.
So the COVID-19 represents the danger of a new genocide for us. That's what we are facing right now.
E é preciso tirar uma lição desse momento, né? Uma lição de que é preciso romper urgentemente com esse modelo econômico, né, totalmente destruidor.
So we need to learn something from these terrible moments that we are living. And I guess that what we need to learn is that enough is enough, and the economical model that we are reproducing is predator, and we need to change it.
É momento de uma autorreflexão, né, para que as pessoas possam voltar para si mesmo e pensar que tipo de sociedade nós queremos no futuro.
So it's time for looking within and truly choose what kind of society we want to live in from now on.
É momento de exercitar a nossa solidariedade.
We need to exercise our solidarity abilities.
E entender esse momento também como uma providência da Mãe Terra.
And to understand the moment as Mother Earth's providence.
O mundo todo muito acelerado, as pessoas preocupadas com o consumo, né? As pessoas sempre correndo, e ninguém tinha tempo de parar para olhar para si mesmo, para olhar para sua família. Então, é um momento de você sentir a falta, né, do quanto que o abraço é importante.
So people were always rushing and had no time for anything, because the order was to go for consuming habits. And so right now everyone needs to stop that. So it's time to learn the value of being in a family space. And it's interesting that the thing that we cannot do right now, which is to hold each other, is something that's going to make us be aware of how much is important to have contact, to have loving contact with ourselves and our families.
É um momento de se perceber que todo mundo está correndo risco igualmente. O vírus não escolhe quem é rico, quem é pobre, quem é negro, quem é branco, quem é, né, que está na periferia, na cidade, né? Então, é o momento das pessoas perceber, né? Nunca foi tão fácil de perceber que o dinheiro não compra tudo.
It has never been so easy to understand that money cannot buy everything, because the virus just makes no distinction if it's a neighborhood, if it's black or white or yellow or whatever. If it's, you know, everyone's truly the same facing this challenge.
Bom, então é o momento da gente, né, voltar para si mesmo, né, nos voltar para si mesmo e pensar o quanto que é o momento da gente reforçar essa luta coletiva por uma nova sociedade, por um novo planeta, onde todo mundo se respeita e todo mundo, né, tenha empatia com o outro.
So it's really time for us to gather, to know that only a collective movement is going to change the world's order. And let's make it more respectful, let's have more solidarity, and let's move forward to a better society, a better place.
Já resistimos a muitas e muitas violências, né? E com certeza vamos resistir mais essa.
We have already faced many kinds of violence, and so we are going to resist to one more, which is this one. We're strong and we're all together in this one.
É isso aí, obrigada.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sônia. And
Obrigada a você, Sônia.
we really appreciate your words, Sônia. And also, there's a lot of love coming to you and hugs from the chat section, just so she knows there's a lot of energy coming towards her of appreciation. So I'm going to let you go.
Todo mundo mandando energia e mandando.
I'm going to let you two go. Why don't you go ahead, both of you go on mute now and stay on the phone together, because we're going to go to the next speaker. So Maria, if you and Sônia could reconnect on phones so that you could translate for her, but go on mute on the Zoom. Okay, great. Thank you. So we're now going to hear from our next speaker, also from Brazil, Daiara Tukano. And I just wanted to also mention, that it is really such an important time to really be kind together and really loving, because people are going through a lot of hardship, and to also know that it's historically known that during, crises like this, there are cracks in the system where the world that we are dreaming of has an opportunity to be shaped and to come into being. And so it's a really interesting moment of such sorrow and loss and fear for people or grieving, but at the same time, we are stopped, and we now have this chance to really think about how we want to move forward and how we can move our collective movements closer together for what we've all been fighting for many, many years. So with that, I'd like to hand the floor to you, Daiara. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, thank you for inviting me to share this beautiful space. I just want to reaffirm what Sônia just said about this panorama of the indigenous struggle facing the COVID. The anti-indigenous speech of the actual president in Brazil has been something that is really violent and that has gone through the dismantling of the indigenous politics and the increase of the attacks in indigenous territories. Sônia herself and her nation had lost many warriors recently by this hate speech that has been reaffirmed by the government. We are also facing the lack of resources for health politics and the criminalization of the communities that are struggling to be isolated. We have many indigenous communities that are trying to block the roads and avoid that their territories to be invaded by people, and the government is fighting this officially. And also the insistence to legalize the mining exploitation in indigenous territories is something really concerning. One of the deaths that we faced in the Yanomami nation of a young boy of 15 years old was caused because of that, of the invasion of illegal mining in indigenous territories. So we are still fighting the same issues in this time of pandemics. And it's, as she was saying, it's not something new for us. Maybe what is new is that we are together this time. I was listening to an indigenous chief remembering that we are facing pandemics for the last 500 years or more, or so, but this time the entire world is facing it. And for us, in this panorama of absolute lack of access to health politics and security politics, is really concerning when we think of the possibility of having whole indigenous communities under the threat of a very much severe genocide. And also counting with the omission of the state, as she was saying, because we have been through that as well before during the dictatorship times, where the Brazilian government just hide the actual numbers of persons that that died with contamination. And I'd like to thank a lot all the indigenous leaders of the APIB, Sônia, and all the chiefs that are really struggling to make an effort to have a good communication, having health campaigns in indigenous languages, reaffirming the importance of being isolated this time. We still have whole indigenous communities that are indeed isolated peoples for more than 500 years that still hiding in the Amazon, and we are really concerned with them. We have not just the attacks and the invasions of the mining, the illegal mining, we also have to deal in many territories with the invasion of several kinds of traffics, wood traffic, drug traffic, people traffic, and religious missionaries that think that they are helping indigenous nations. That is not true. And at the same time, it's really interesting in how we are having this opportunity to debate like the crumbling of some word, of some system. Many people is talking about the end of the world, and once again, they are trying to listen to indigenous nations to see if we have any solution. We have gone through many endings of the world. We have gone through many pandemics, and the best solution that we always found is just to pay attention to nature and respect the cycles, and not having a behavior of aggressive consumption and exploitation of what is around us. So maybe what is more threatened today, what we are facing is the possibility of having an ending of an economic, of a culture of exploitation, of a culture of capitalism and selfishness that has led us to so much violence and oppression. In the indigenous movement, not just in Brazil, but all over the world, we have learned to live in diversity, respecting the different cultures, respecting the territories, and always cultivating the acknowledgement that we have to reoccupy our territories with our indigenous wisdom. And now we have this opportunity to build something together in a more, I don't know how to say it in English, like, ai meu Deus, Maria Paula me ajuda, de jeito mais equilibrado.
With equilibrium, in a balanced way.
Yes, that was the word. With more balance and respect. Yesterday somebody was asking me how we imagine the world of the future. People are talking about a future world. I believe many of these, not only the indigenous, but all the oppressed communities, those that are considered to be in the margins, of those that are marginalized and criminalized, and those that are called as minorities. The only hope we have in our hearts right now is to have dignity and self-respect between each other, to build a culture and an economy that will allow us to do that. The indigenous movement and the APIB is an example of that, not only just in Brazil, but all over the world. There was a really important campaign fighting the agribusiness and the extracting market, like the mineration, all over the world. And now people are lacking food. Here in Brazil, we have lots of deserts of soybean. We have desert of soybean, we have deserts of sugarcane, we have desert of cows. Nobody's going to eat soybeans. We need food. We need food. We need to put our bare foot on the earth and cultivate and be able to seed the possibility of building a different society together. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your good words. And we're going to have a time for people to ask questions and have answers. But before we move to the next speaker, Daiara, I wanted to just bring in one piece of information maybe you could share with us. And it's, you know, hearing from you and Sônia, really, it brings tears to my eyes. It's very, very heartbreaking and also very inspiring. It's both. So thank you for your good words. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about, you know, we know last year there was that big Indigenous Women's March, and just if you could talk a little bit about how the women are working together right now, even though we are all having to be isolated. Just, it would be great for us to hear a little bit about, you know, what's happening with the Women's March and, you know, how you're still collecting and communicating now.
Here in Brazil, in this whole complexity of the indigenous movement, we are in April. That is actually the national month of indigenous pride and fight. The 19th, April the 19th, is like the Indian Day, and we were supposed to be gathering here in Brasilia with thousands of indigenous leaders from all over the country, but of course with this pandemics, it has been postponed. Just postponed in physical presence, because we are really active in many channels of communication. The APIB is really active. Sônia is doing live streams every day, talking to indigenous leaders. For those who can follow and understand Portuguese, is really important to hear what she has to say and what other indigenous have to say. Brazil is a really large territory. I know that we were invited to talk more about the Amazon, but we are not just in the Amazon, and we always need to say that. We have indigenous all over Brazil, in the northeast and south and center, facing severe violences. And we have many indigenous media. I am coordinator of the Yandê radio, but there is also Media India, that is an official channel for the APIB communication. And we are trying to get the situation of indigenous people out of this invisibility. And women are extremely important for that. We have had each day more and more women warriors in front of the line, and in this time where we are dealing with the health security issues, of course the mothers and the women that are truly the great administrators of our communities are fundamental. Soon this year we will also supposed to have our elections for mayor, and I don't know how to say it in English. Like we are supposed to have these political elections, and we were building a campaign to have more indigenous candidatures.
Yes, candidates. It's mayor and municipal, elections.
We're working on having more indigenous candidates because it's important to occupy all the spaces, especially all the institutional spaces. And of course, in this pandemic time, it's really difficult to have that sort of campaign, but it is still going on, and we hope that we will have a larger group of women candidates, women indigenous candidates, to spread the voice and the strength of indigenous nations and build democracy and build society together.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that update and those powerful words, Daiara. And it's really wonderful to hear how, you know, the communications are still going forward. And just so folks know, that section, a link to where Daiara every day, I think you're working online every day in the chat for that. And we will come back to you and Sônia in a little bit with. And thank you everyone for joining us. And I'm trying at this point to see if Patricia Kalinga has managed to enter the call. We've still been having some difficulties getting her on, and I wanted to find out from our tech team if she's been able to join the call. Could you please let us be updated, Catherine, about that? Okay, so let's see if we can get Patricia on the line. And again, Patricia Kalinga is a Kichwa leader from Sarayaku, Ecuador, and she's a leader and spokesperson for the Amazon Women in Defense of the Jungle. And then we're also going to be having, after her, Helena Gualinga, who is a social activist, 17-year-old youth activist from Kichwa territory of Sarayaku as well. And I think that Helena is going to be able to translate for Patty, but I'm not sure if we've worked out our technology, so let's give it a try. Are you there, Patricia and Helena?
Hi, Osprey. So we were not able to get Patricia to Zoom, but I have her on FaceTime right now, so she will be speaking, and then I will be translating. Is that okay?
That's fine. Can we see her face? You could just hold it right up to the screen. There we go. It's we'll make whatever work. That's great. Let her know that we can see her and we're ready to hear.
Yeah. Kunangura skandari kunguna y kuintano shangi.
Hola, Osprey. Buenas tardes con todos y con todas. He estado con inconvenientes de la tecnología, pero me da mucho gusto ser parte de este webinar. Saludos desde la Amazonía de Ecuador.
Hi, Osprey. Thank you for having me on this webinar. I have had some difficulties with getting into Zoom, but I'm really happy to be here. And regards. Yeah.
Estamos atravesando situaciones difíciles, circunstancias completamente inimaginables dentro de nuestro contexto. Pero muy a pesar de esto, con optimismo, es interesante poder hablar a través de estas conexiones que se nos permiten.
Right now, we're going through a very hard situation, something we actually did not imagine. But it's good that we can have these positive connections and speak about what is going on.
Un poco antes de que toda esta situación nos paralizara, para el 8 de marzo las mujeres amazónicas de varias nacionalidades estuvimos muy activas realizando acciones de exigencia de derechos sobre el territorio y
Kutirima ipati pitirame.
Antes de que la pandemia nos paralizara, las mujeres amazónicas el 8 de marzo estuvimos haciendo acciones en Quito de exigencia de derechos.
Before all of this started, Mujeres Amazónicas, which is a collective, the Amazonian women, were having actions in Quito, the Ecuadorian capital, demanding our rights and our rights to our territories.
Tratando de concienciar de que era importante defender la Amazonía, que era importante respetar los derechos de los defensores, que era importante visibilizar todo lo que estaban viviendo las mujeres. Estuvimos 3 días en la ciudad de Quito.
We were there trying to raise awareness about the situation with indigenous women, with our human rights, and try to make them respected.
Sin embargo, al regreso, cada uno hemos tenido nuestras propias particularidades. Por ejemplo, mi pueblo se ha inundado 3 veces. El cambio climático ha sido terrible para Sarayaku y nos están informando que se está en estos momentos nuevamente inundándose, algo nunca visto en nuestra historia.
After we were in Quito, we returned to our homes, but then something that never had happened before, our communities were flooded in such magnitude that we had never seen before, and right now they're informing us that it is happening again.
Los pueblos indígenas en estos momentos, tanto las mujeres como los pueblos y nacionalidades, atravesamos emergencias dobles, triples, inundaciones, y a eso se suma el tema de la pandemia, pero también ahorita empieza a faltar los insumos básicos, como son jabón, sal, y estamos ante una realidad completamente fuerte, divergente.
Right now, we are all going through a very hard time, but indigenous people are facing double or even triple crisis. And on top of this, we also have the COVID-19. And right now, the communities are lacking access to basic products.
Pero también se ha visibilizado de que los pueblos indígenas empezaron a cerrar las vías de acceso para poder salvaguardarse de la pandemia. Y hay otros grupos que no avanzaron a ingresar. Muchos huyeron, pero otros no avanzaron, y entonces hay una realidad social también en las ciudades.
We have seen that the indigenous communities have been blocking the ways to our communities, but some could not go back to their communities. So we have a social situation in the cities when indigenous people are stuck in the cities and they cannot go back to their communities.
Creo que está muy claro para algunos, esperemos que también para los gobiernos, que sería una gran esperanza, de que esta pandemia y todo lo que estamos viviendo es a consecuencia de las acciones que hemos tomado a lo largo de todos estos años como seres humanos.
I think it's very clear to everyone that this is what is happening right now, and hopefully the government also sees it, that these are consequences of decisions we have made in the past.
Los incendios que ocurrieron en Brasil han demostrado en los últimos meses que el clima está completamente desestabilizado, enloquecido. ¿Cómo puede imaginarse que en menos de 20 días puedas tener 3 o 4 inundaciones con metros de altura de crecida de ríos? ¿Cómo se puede imaginar que una pandemia como esta puede ser porque es la única forma de alguna manera que nosotros pensemos en respetar la madre tierra y que por lo menos los océanos, la selva, en algunos sitios estén descansando? Yo creo que nos da una gran lección.
We can clearly see that the fires in Brazil, the floods that we have been seeing 3 to 4 in just a few weeks, are a clear sign of that our Mother Earth needs to rest. This is a lesson to the humanity. We need to learn from this.
Lastimosamente en esta elección, los pueblos indígenas somos los que más duramente estamos pagando, y los que estamos en mayor riesgo, tanto en la pandemia como en el cambio climático, porque hemos estado luchando para defenderlo, pero las consecuencias están siendo afectadas en primera línea. Tal como luchamos en primera línea, las consecuencias del cambio climático nos están afectando en primera línea, y si la pandemia, Dios no quiera, que ingrese a nuestros territorios, nos pueden diezmar a todos los pueblos indígenas, y ese es nuestro gran temor en estos tiempos.
Sadly, this lesson is affecting a lot to the indigenous people. We're seeing the impacts of the pandemic, but we're also living the impacts of climate change. And our worst fear right now is that our communities could be completely wiped out by the pandemic. And the communities that are fighting on the front lines of climate change, of defending their lands, are also the ones that right now are fighting on the front lines of these pandemics and these disasters.
Cuando mi padre hace 25 años me decía, van a generar epidemias, van a generar muerte, van a salir enfermedades, con todo lo que el hombre está haciendo, a veces uno, ni siendo hija, puede creer que puede ser en esta magnitud. O cuando decía, la tierra puede volverse espuma, yo tengo miedo de que realmente ahora se vuelva espuma después de un tiempo. Yo creo que es el momento de centrarnos, de ver cómo podemos salir adelante con toda esta situación. Y a mí me ha tocado quedarme en la ciudad. Creo que así es como define el destino, porque desde aquí hemos podido llevar ayuda y empezar a tender la mano. Me quedé por las inundaciones, por mis padres ancianos, porque me dijeron, no, ya no puedes ir, y ya se cerraron las vías. Y ahorita hemos estado acá moviéndonos para tratar de ayudar a toda la gente, tanto los que se han quedado en la ciudad como los que han huido a la selva y los que están con las inundaciones.
Many years ago, my dad used to say that if we keep destroying our earth, we will get sick, we will see pandemics. And at that time, I didn't realize how right he was in what he was saying. And right now we're seeing exactly what he said over 20 years ago. Right now, I am in the city. I got stuck here because of the floods and because of the pandemic, and I cannot go back to my community. But at the same time, I'm realizing how important it is that I'm in the community, because now we're able to help the people that are stuck here in the city and do not have access to their own communities. And that we are also sending help to the communities affected by the floods.
Hay que tomar en cuenta que todo parece haberse juntado en Ecuador. La pandemia, las inundaciones, se suma la rotura del oleoducto, que espero Helena la contaminación, el hambre, el miedo, todo parece junto. Entonces, me he puesto a pensar que tal vez nosotros estamos siendo no tan activas como deberíamos ser mucho más activas. Porque como mujeres deberíamos tomar decisiones mucho más radicales, más fuertes, porque si no lo hacemos, las consecuencias lo estamos viviendo con demasiada prontitud.
Right now, it seems that everything is happening here right now in Ecuador. We're seeing floods, we're seeing oil pipeline ruptures, we're seeing hunger and pollution. And I think this is also a time to realize that we need to be more active. More than we are right now. Women need to, we as women need to be even stronger, because right now we see that everything that we're doing have not been enough. People are not listening, and to prevent this from happening in the future, we need to stand up stronger.
Y porque por el mismo hecho de que como mujeres siempre estamos pendientes, nuestra materia gris del cerebro nos hace estar como mucho más despiertas. Yo creo que es el momento de actuar más, independientemente de lo que digan los gobiernos, porque los gobiernos parecen no estar entendiendo muy bien. Y yo tengo mucha fe y esperanza en mujeres indígenas, mujeres amazónicas, mujeres de distintos lados que están luchando, y ese creo que es el camino, y es el camino que escogimos.
I think that we as women are very woke, and I don't think the government is. The government is not listening. The government does not understand. And that's why I have hope. I have hope because I have hope because of indigenous women. I have hope because of women. Yeah.
Hoy más que nunca, Nos ha demostrado esta pandemia de que estamos absolutamente interconectados, que el mundo no es América, no es Europa, no es África, no es Asia, que el mundo es uno solo, que hay esa conexión, ya sea en la enfermedad, y todo lo que hagamos vamos a tener las consecuencias toda la humanidad. La pandemia nos lo está demostrando, en eso tenemos que basar. Toda acción, puede ser que ocurra en Brasil, puede ser que ocurra en el África, y tal como ocurrió en la China, así sea deforestación, nos está afectando. Esta interconexión que hemos compartido hace que los impactos afecten a toda la humanidad.
Today, more than ever, we are seeing that we are connected. The world is not divided in Africa, South America, Europe, Asia. Everything we do will affect all humanity.
Gracias, Osprey, por invitarnos a la reunión. Saludos a Sônia, a las mujeres que están en esta reunión y a todas aquellas que han estado pendientes de nosotras, nos han apoyado, se han solidarizado. Esto no está por terminarse inmediatamente. Esto sigue de largo, lamentablemente. Y vamos a necesitar extendernos absolutamente la mano todas para poder estar pendientes de cada una de nosotras, inclusive en la distancia, y poder apoyarnos. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you, Osprey, for having me. I salute Sônia, all the women here, and everyone who has been very supportive and have been allies to us. This, unfortunately, will continue, and we need to extend our arms to one another. We need to help each other in these times. And thank you, everyone, for listening.
Great. And Helena, could you please, before you speak, let Patty know that there'll be time for some questions for her later, but also in this moment, to simply let her know that we love her, that we support her, we're standing in solidarity, and that we are here for the long term, and that in the chat section, we've been putting links to directly fund the floods and all the different Amazon connections we have for funding. So just if you could please let her know that, and then we'll bring you on to speak. Thank you.
Riman masti pagraci kan rimash kamanda una nik bishi pregunta guna tiangarau chivi kambarai go chivi yacha chishkangi nyukas I wing chi Sarayaku tayana paushka guna tachkai chat bi churaun chi compartiun chi nisharim.
Alimán.
Yeah. Okay. This is okay.
Great. So now we have, thank you so much for Helena for being so innovative and figuring out how to make all that work at the last minute. We're really thrilled to have you with us, and please go ahead and take the floor, and we look forward to your comments. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Helena. I'm 18, and I'm actually Patricia's niece, so she's my aunt. I'm from Sarayaku. Sarayaku is a community in the Ecuadorian Amazon. Sarayaku is one of the communities that has, Sarayaku is very known because of their fight against oil companies, and because they were able to, or we were able to kick them out a few years ago, even though they had the government's support, they had the military's support, and we had, it was just my community and fighting against these big powers. So I grew up in this community. It's about 25 minutes in an airplane and about 5 hours in a canoe from the closest city. So it's the access there is very limited. And as my aunt Patricia was saying, recently we have been seeing floods in our territory. And I remember that my grandmother used to tell me that that happened every 10 to 20 years, a flood. And when I was 12, I think I saw my first flood, and it was quite, like I had never experienced anything like that before. So I was very shocked. But this year we have seen 3 floods happening in less than 3 weeks, and one of those being the worst ones we've ever seen, covering all the houses to the roof. It has destroyed our schools, the bridges, people's homes, and it has also destroyed our fields, which means that we have no food sovereignty in our community for the next 6 months to 1 year. And this it's a lot harder to handle the situation as the COVID-19 is going on. The access now to our communities is even more limited than before. We are not able to send people to the community, which means we cannot send them help. So we have had to have people coming from the community, meet people from the city at the port, and then being able to send help to them, because they have been left, as I said, without houses, without food. And this is extremely hard right now for these communities to face the situation. And I was thinking before the pandemic happened, what will happen to indigenous communities if the virus gets to our communities? And my first thought was, okay, we have our fields, we have the fish, and we can still hunt in our forest. We will not have a problem with the pandemic. But then I thought, okay, but if the pandemic gets to our territories, if someone gets sick in a household, who will go to the fields, who will go hunting, and who will go fishing if the entire family gets sick? Which makes it even more complicated for indigenous people to face that situation. And now that we don't even have fields, we cannot even, we have lost the fish that people have in their homes. Where can we get our food? How do we face that situation? And so the government in Ecuador has no protocols for indigenous communities to face the pandemic. The situation in indigenous communities is completely different compared to the situation in the cities, because we have another way of living. We don't have access to the same things in our communities, and there is nothing that is adequate for our communities. No protocols, no instructions, nothing. And this also shows the lack of inclusion of the government. The indigenous people all around the world, including Ecuador, including Brazil, have always been left out of the systems, and now it's more visible than ever. We're seeing how we are not provided with these protocols. The medicines are we don't have any medicines in our community. The doctor in the community has no medicines left, and no one is actually caring about that. And another thing that my aunt mentioned was the oil spill that happened recently in another river in Ecuador, which means that this province, where I'm staying and where Sarayaku is facing all these floods, but in another province, they are facing an oil spill, which means that they cannot drink their water, they cannot fish anymore. And the thing that most worries the government are the economic issues they will be facing due to the rupture of the pipeline, and not the people that right now have no food, they have no water, they have not access to the city due to the COVID-19, so they cannot go out to the cities and buy basic needs. And right now it's polluting the entire river, and it's also expected to reach Peru, and the cleanup of the river is not efficient enough to stop it. And all of this is going on at the same time as the COVID-19, which means, as Patricia said, indigenous people are facing double crisis. And the government is not doing anything about the COVID-19. They are not sending out these protocols. They are not helping. And at the same time, they're not helping with these other disasters, as the floods, as the pipeline rupture. And the pipeline rupture, people had been saying that this will happen, and no measures were taken, even though they had warned of this. And the same thing with the floods. The floods are happening because in the headwaters, they're cutting down the trees, and it's also a direct result of what climate change is causing in the Amazon. And the government is completely blind to these issues, and have always been. And as I said, this is exactly how we see how excluded indigenous communities, indigenous people, and the way of living are from the systems, and that they never have been taken into account. But this is also a time of realizing that we as people, we as nations, actually can respond to crises as well, because we have, in most countries, we have seen measures taken, at least for the cities, not maybe the communities, but we have seen that we can take to extreme measures in order to curb a pandemic or a situation, which means that we can do the same with the climate crisis. We can do the same with the crises with the oil rupture. But the only thing we need is to actually want it. And well, the problem is that the government does not. But then again, it's our responsibility to make sure that people listen to us, that we pressure our governments, and also support the people that actually are at the front lines, as the people of Sarayaku, as Sonia's tribe, all of these people that actually actively are defending their lands. And also realize that these people that always have been defending, that always have been risking everything and able to defend their lands and able to defend their lives, the lives of their children, are actually the ones that are being hit the hardest right now by these crises. They are being hit the hardest by the climate crisis, by all these other things that are happening, and on top of that, they're extremely vulnerable to situations like the pandemic. Yeah, as I said, I think we all have this responsibility of doing everything in our power to be aware, and also to pressure the ethnicities that we can. We cannot let this happen and not do anything about it, because this is not something that is going to happen tomorrow with climate change and all of these things happening. This is something that is happening right now, and people are actually seeing the effects of it. I, for example, did not think when I was smaller that I would actually be seeing these things, that I actually would see almost my entire community be underwater, and that everything, to see my family's houses get completely destroyed. I had no idea I would be seeing that, but now it's actually happening. So it's not anymore, it's actually happening today. And this is the time where we can act, and it's also a time to wake up to the reality. It's not just something that we think will happen. This will happen, or this will happen in another part of the world. This is happening right here in my home. This is happening to a lot of people in their homes. I'm not the only one. We're not the only ones facing this. Yeah, I think that as someone who is young, we also, or as youth, we are also aware of that this could be what is normal for us in the future. This could be something that we could be facing every week, every month. And that was not normal when my parents grew up. It was not normal, but right now it's getting normal. Children who are growing up right now are growing up with these floods happening every month, every 3 weeks. And that is a very scary situation to realize that okay, something that we were so afraid of is actually happening now, and it's the everyday life of people now. I think that Osprey already mentioned that there is a link, and if you want to support the affected families, you can follow the link. And yeah, I think that was everything for me. Thank you for having me, Osprey, and thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you very much for those powerful words, Helena. And, you know, it's really, you know, before we go forward, I just really want to acknowledge your strength as a young woman, an 18-year-old young woman, being the voice of the youth on this call. And, you know, it's very heartbreaking, you know, to really put into perspective, you know, someone your age and all the youth growing up now to face, you know, these multiple crises of a pandemic, of flooding, of climate crisis, and to imagine a future of ongoing disasters. And I just really want to acknowledge your courage, your leadership, and you know, the boldness it takes to step into the role of working to make change in the midst of so much challenge. So, you know, please know that we stand with you, we stand in solidarity, and we give you much love, and send you our prayers, because you know, this is a very hard time, and this is not going to end soon. So we need to be here for each other for a long time. I'm getting a lot of different questions, and I'm going to, because of time, and I know we've you know, I don't want to take up too much more of our speakers' time and everyone who's joined us on the call, but it's such a rare moment that we can all have this kind of conversation and connectivity. I appreciate people's patience as we work through the technology. People are still asking about the links. I want to say again, at the end of the call, we're going to be collecting all of the links, all of the resources, and putting that on our social media channels at Women's Earth and Climate Action Network. It will also be on our website, so that we can continue to support all of these women in their efforts and protect their communities in the Amazon and other regions as well. I'm going to kind of phrase a question, and then we can go to Sônia, and then to you, Daiara, and then to Patty, and then back to you, Helena. And just, it's sort of a wide-ranging question, but I think it summarizes a lot of what I'm seeing in the questions, which is, one, there are already folks who are contributing money to your communities. They're working on social media to support your efforts. What more can they do? I mean, we really are doing everything we can to raise funds on this call for your communities, and we will continue to do that. And more is needed, and that's number one. You know, we want to make sure you get funded to care for yourselves, spread the word through social media. But, you know, is there more that we could collectively be doing for all of you right now in this immediate time with these very, you know, fascist governments, you know, the way that our governments here in the United States, you know, mirroring what's happening certainly in Brazil. You know, like, how can we support you in other ways? If there's more, please let us know. And then, so that's the first part of the question, just like the support of what you need immediately. And then if you also just comment on, you know, how you view the long run, you know, how can we share long-term solidarity and your vision going forward? So it's a two-part question. And let's go ahead and start with Sônia, with Maria translating for her. We're going to hand the floor back over to Sônia to answer that question. I'm glad to repeat it if needed. Sônia, you'll need to unmute.
Vai, cadê a Maria Paula?
Maria?
Acho que ela dormiu, ela estava na rede.
Eu posso traduzir, Sônia, se você quiser.
Vai aí, querida.
Como é que você está, minha linda?
Bem.
Que saudade de você, cara. Putz, que saudade de você. Que barra, hein?
Barra.
Não, o negócio é o seguinte, essa pergunta que ela fez foi minha, que era o seguinte, com que mais a gente pode fazer? Quer dizer, a gente pode doar dinheiro, porque a gente sabe que vocês precisam disso, a gente pode fazer social media e como é que se diz, e entrevistas e divulgações aqui, mas o que mais você acha que a gente pode fazer daqui para poder ajudar vocês? Essa foi a pergunta que eu tinha feito, que ela falou, que é para você.
Olha, Ana, bem importante, acho que essa pressão internacional, principalmente com campanhas, né, contra a mineração, por exemplo, né? Eu não falei na minha fala inicial sobre um grande perigo que ronda ainda aqui, né, essa pandemia. O Ministério de Minas e Energia anunciou uma portaria que trata a mineração como atividade essencial, né? Olha só. Então, nós precisamos fazer uma pressão para que essa portaria não tenha validade, né? Da mesma forma que nós temos que fazer uma pressão para retirar os garimpeiros de dentro da terra Yanomami. Está lá 20 mil garimpeiros, né, com total prejuízo para o meio ambiente, mas também com risco de levar o vírus para os indígenas, né? O caso do jovem Yanomami que faleceu tem esse histórico de vir de uma área próxima a garimpo, né, e que a gente atribui também essa contaminação a essa invasão, né, do garimpo. Então, é muito importante que vocês possam se mobilizar para poder pressionar o governo brasileiro, para pressionar o Congresso Nacional, né, com campanhas, com denúncias, né, porque, de qualquer forma, a gente tem que trazer a pressão de todos os lados. Né?
Eu concordo, mas olha só, a gente, na verdade, esse governo não está do nosso lado, ele está completamente contra a gente. Então, assim, uma estratégia que a gente está tentando aqui é fazer uma greve geral, entendeu? Que greve geral, que a gente já está todo mundo mais ou menos numa greve geral, entendeu? Então, assim, isso é uma ação que todo mundo consegue fazer ao mesmo tempo, entendeu? Todo mundo, eu daqui, você daí, todo mundo de tudo quanto é lugar, entendeu? Então, eu acho que a gente não tem que pensar, a gente tem que ter autonomia agora de governo, entendeu? Eu acho que agora está na hora da gente pensar o que a gente, enquanto comunidade, pode fazer com a gente, comunidade, entendeu?
Ok.
Do you want to just wait a minute and translate the first part, and then we go to the second part, just so we can get the English folks listening in? So we'll do it in 2 parts. Go ahead and translate the first part, and then we'll go to the second. Thank you.
Of course. The first thing she says is we need, what else we can need more than give money, send money to them because they really need like practical things like mask, glove, protection, cleaning things, all these basic necessities. They, of course, they send money for many indigenous to try to defend themselves is basic. But more than that, interviews, social media about what's going on there, and also be really serious in a pressure, you know, the mineradoras, fuck, I don't know how to say minerador, the big companies, no, that work with minerals and also the garimpeiros, the people that they are like invade the territories and they're killing them, you know. I mean, but this is something that happened there. I mean, the territory is totally under invasion, you know. It means, I mean, that we're talking about. I mean, really how well we can do. And then she said that we need to do a lot of pressure in these specific factors that happen there.
Okay, so just 1 second before we go back to Sônia. We are, I see Maria's back. Thank you so much. I don't know your name. Thank you so much for helping to translate that. I really appreciate that. I want folks to also know that there are divestment and defunding campaigns, and we're going to be putting some links there, like the Stop the Money Pipeline campaign has campaigns to stop deforestation and stop these attacks. So we're going to be sharing some of those links. And also Amazon Watch is doing a lot of work around putting out reports about which specific companies are the ones that are funding this deforestation and the mining. So there's several links that we're going to be sharing so that everyone has access to some of these campaigns that are going on. We have a divestment campaign at WeCan. So there's several divestment and defunding campaigns of the exact companies that are doing the harm in Brazil around the issues of both mining and fossil fuel extraction, but also agribusiness. And I'm sure those links, they're being put into the chat now. We'll make sure you have those to address some of those issues. But let's go ahead and go to part 2 of the question. Thank you.
Eu acho que a segunda parte foi uma questão da assim, quanto que a gente tem que ser autônomo agora. Oh, sorry. Now, I mean, the second part was about autonomy. You know, how we all need to be autonomous. And in reality, how we can collaborate between we all. Because we cannot trust or expect nothing more for the government. The government, in reality, is the principal agent that is attacking now indigenous territory. The government, United States government and Brazilian government is killing and invite indigenous territory right now. Let's be awake about that. The companies that is invited is European companies and also is American companies that now is in Brazil together with the son of a bitch, Bolsonaro invite the indigenous territory. Let's be clear here. The thing is, autonomy means general strike. We are already globally in general strike. And I think we just need to continue in general strike. That's the only way we broke the system. The only way to break the system now is general strike all over the world. A real global revolution. That we need, and we are able to do this right now. Yes. Do you know? And then what I think is autonomy first. We need autonomy. We all need autonomy now. What you know, we'll occupy our house. Nobody more pay rent. That thing. Even if you have money to pay rent, stop. Help people that now need no pay rent or occupy their house. That's things. The second thing is start to plant food in the top of your rooftop, in the garden, community gardens. You know, try to be autonomous in a level of food. That we need to do now. Food is something that really fuck, and we fuck really fast. Then, I mean, autonomy, also personal autonomy, I think we need that. That means, Sônia, fala mais, que mais? Eu tentei traduzir, mas eu sou meio criativa, eu botei coisa junto aí, entendeu? Quer dizer, eu tô assim, falando também que a gente tem que ser autônomo, parar de defender essa porra desse governo, começar a entender que a gente tem que ter autonomia, esse paternalismo de ter que defender de governo, presidente, isso é um absurdo, entendeu? Presidente é um absurdo, todos eles, esquerda, direita, tudo a mesma merda, a gente sabe disso, a gente sabe que é tudo a mesma merda, então é mais do que na hora de ter autonomia. Então, assim, o que mais você acha em relação a essa questão de autonomia, Soninha?
Não, eu passo para frente, deixa as outras também falarem, tá? Obrigada.
Tá bom.
Eu, Adriana.
Você, Helena, Helena, que pensa disso? Você entendeu? O que parece?
Thank you so much for that, Sônia, and thank you so much for translating and your intervention. We really appreciate it. And it is a time of, you know, let's be bold and transformative, and, you know, life and death could not be more in our faces. So thank you for that intervention. We really appreciate it. And let's go ahead and hear from you, Daiara. Please go ahead, Daiara. Daiara?
Okay. I believe it's really important to still supporting all the indigenous movements all over the world. Here in Brazil, we still have constant campaigns to support the actions of the APIB. We needed to postpone the Free Land Camp, that is our major event in Brasilia, but we still in need to manage to help our indigenous leaders and many indigenous communities that are lacking food and access to health programs. And of course, it's all related, like keep reinforcing the worldwide communication, denouncing what is happening to indigenous peoples, but as possible, also pay attention to the campaigns that are meant to support those communities that are not attended by any government, by any action of the government.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to comment? This will sort of be our last round. Do you want to comment anything, Daiara, about, I I know you have a lot of knowledge from your people, and I just wondered if you wanted to share anything that will, you know, one, our support for you, of course, is first and foremost, but, you know, just thoughts for people to be able to navigate this time. Any wisdom you might want to share with us?
We are talking too much about the ending of the world, and for sure it's a difficult time to be apart, you know. Most of our indigenous communities here, if you exist, is because we have respected distance and isolation when needed. There are still populations that are isolated in the Amazon forest, and that's why they survived, and that's why we are still here being able to fight. So it's really important to not deny the reality that we are facing, and considering that taking care of our health, of our personal individual health, is also taking care of the health of the community. And have this memory. I believe that indigenous nations, we are ancient people that share an ancient memory of the world. I hope that we won't forget what led us to this point. We cannot forget our part of the responsibility of this crisis of the of nature, all these climate issues that we are facing. We need to assume our responsibility in that. And it has been hard, but it's really special to see how a few weeks of isolation has shown us how nature is still present. You know, there is people that is being able to listen and to see nature around, and it can be like, yeah, it's not something that we can even reveal in words, but just listening to that and connecting to that in other ways, and understand that if one day we dream to get out of our places and see the world, just to keep it quiet, just to let it live. You know, as indigenous, we are just fighting to have peace. And peace is something that we can just cultivate in our actions. And so if in so many weeks we have had like a decrease on pollution, we can do it. It's possible to do it and to live with it. And have also the memory of all the other crises that we have gone through. You know, like when I have the opportunity to talk to European people, for example, and I also imagine how hard it was to face like the pest, the black pest, I don't know, I don't know how to say it in English. Yeah, the Black Plague and something like that. We are facing this, but after the Black Plague, what happened is that they run about the world colonizing everything. And they run about the world exploiting all our nations. And they build an illusion of being independent. Now we are in front of the opportunity of building our autonomy in a different way that doesn't need to depend on the exploitation of other human beings, neither the nature. So we need to breathe and have time to have imagination and think about another economy, another politic, another chart, another map to the world. All those limits, all those borders are just illusion. And so let's enjoy this moment of being with ourselves and understand that we can nurture health and dignity and peace first within us to share it with the world, because the world will continue And I believe life still go on, even if it is with humankind or not. But for those that will survive and go on, let's they have the memory that we need to celebrate all the best in humankind and nature. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those beautiful words. And yeah, I mean, that's the thing that we are all really learning is that, you know, humans are just one part of the adventure of this beautiful mother planet. And we're not the only creatures here. We're not the only experiment in evolution. And, you know, we're guests here on this beautiful planet with all the other animals and plants and all the other living beings. And this is such a mirror of a time for us to understand our place within that greater system of life and that greater system of Mother Earth. So thank you for those good words to remind us of that. And it reminded me also of a piece of graffiti that came out of China, out of one of the subways, and it said, you know, when they were in the biggest part of this COVID pandemic, saying, you know, we can't go back to where we were, because where we were was precisely the problem. So this is a time for us to make these new economies, these new governments, these new ways of connecting and renewing with Mother Earth. And now I would like to bring Patty and Helena back on, you know, again, just to ask that final question from both of you about, you know, anything else about immediate needs. We've talked about funding, more social media, but then also for the long run, sort of your long run view of this moment. And we'll go to Patty and then Helena. Thank you.
Chima pregunta que más de kuna ngura simina tena panuchanchi mana kulkira takachasha mana nyukanchira despi compartisha, pero kasna sunyiwi y mina tankanyiwi.
Con respecto a la pregunta, yo creo que a pesar de que nosotros estamos en cuarentena, las grandes multinacionales y empresas continúan trabajando. Se ha visto aquí en Ecuador que las mineras continúan trabajando, las petroleras también, y hay que estar atentos porque ellos son los que están destruyendo nuestra Amazonía.
To answer your question, we have, I know that everything is on lockdown. We are in our houses, but the companies keep working. The oil companies, the mining companies are still working on our territories, and I think it's we need to be aware of that.
Yo creo que a corto plazo es importante ver que las comunidades con los gobiernos no lo están atendiendo. Allá no han llegado las máscaras, allá no ha llegado jabones, no ha llegado geles, no ha llegado medicina, muy a pesar de que nuestras comunidades están aplicando sus medicinas tradicionales para tratar de prevenir. Pero siempre es importante que haya otro tipo de previsiones. Hay que empezar a presionar a los gobiernos.
To short term, we are already seeing that the governments are not helping. They are not providing us with the things that we need. We are not provided with face masks, soap, medicine, like gels, alcohol, I think it's called. And the indigenous communities right now are only using traditional medicine, but it's important to realize that we, in some cases, we will also need to use other kinds of medicines.
Toda la atención de las autoridades se ha centrado en las grandes ciudades y por eso es que la atención de lo que puede pasar en las comunidades pues no les ponen atención. Eso yo creo que hay que priorizar en esta época complicada, de que llegue hacia las comunidades el apoyo necesario para que puedan tener lo mínimo básico y prever también que tengan productos de primera necesidad sin salir a comprar a la ciudad. Me refiero a que tengan un fósforo así de básico, una funda de sal, un jabón, una vela.
All the attention of the governments right now are in the big cities, and they are not thinking about how the heavy consequences the situation could have in our communities in smaller places. And they have not given any support to the communities. We need to make sure that the communities have access to basic products, for example, salt and soap. And we need to pressure the government for this.
Y muy a pesar de la situación, es importante soñar. Muchas veces lo he mencionado. Hay que apoyar para que existan comunidades de vida en este planeta. Y eso se puede empezar por los pueblos indígenas.
It's important that we also keep dreaming. And it's also important to support the communities that are alive, the forests that are alive. And these are indigenous communities.
Los pueblos indígenas todavía tienen el mantel blanco como para poder hacer eso. Tenemos sabiduría, tenemos naturaleza, estamos a pesar de todas las circunstancias. Solo se necesita apoyar estas comunidades y que ellos puedan lograr que existan estas comunidades sin extracción, pero con todo lo básico posible, sin necesidad de destrucción.
And right now we can say that indigenous communities are heroes, and we also have knowledge to keep protecting our lands, but we also need support in this fight. We need support to keep protecting our land, our territories, but we also need to make sure that these communities that are fighting this are provided with their basic needs and the basic products to continue doing this.
Como Sarayaku, no podemos olvidarnos, como amazónicos, de que la selva es viviente y que eso el mundo tiene que reconocer, de que es un ser vivo, consciente, sujeto de derecho, mucho más allá de nuestros derechos, un derecho que puede hacer que regenere la vida en este planeta.
As the Sarayaku people, as the people from the Amazon, we need to realize that and make other people aware of that our forests are living, the living forest. We call it Kausaksacha in Kichwa. It has rights as you have rights, as human rights. The forests have the forest's rights, nature's rights. And this is very important to understand beings in the forest that maybe we cannot see, but that still are very present and are important for our lives.
Si lográramos aplicar esto, no tendríamos que hacer que este mundo esté en esta crisis. Podríamos lograr que este mundo se equilibre. Necesitamos lograr que propuestas como Kausaksacha o selva viviente sean reconocidos, sean apoyados, sean aprobados y sean impulsados.
If we could understand this, we could protect our forest. We could reach this balance that we need between us and the forest. But for this, we need the governments to acknowledge these proposals and that we actually take action and live by what is the Kausaksacha and the living forest.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you. Muchas gracias, Patty. And we put a link to the information about Kausaksacha, the Living Forest Declaration, in the chat. And we've been very honored at Weekend to be supporters of the Living Forest Declaration for some time. And we will be sharing more information again in our follow-up document where you can learn more about what Patty's talking about. So thank you for bringing that up. And I would like now to hand the floor to Helena to answer the same question to close this out for today. Thank you so much, Patty. And now we go to Helena.
Yeah, so I was actually thinking of exactly the same thing, how important it is for us to understand the Kausaksacha. And to give a little background about what Kausaksacha is for us is Kausaksacha is a proposal that my community launched a few years ago. And this is not something that we just came up with. This is something our elders have taught us. And our elders teach us that the tree that is beside you have rights as much as you have your rights. The things that you are surrounded by also have rights. And that is what we are taught when we are children. We see ourselves part of what is surrounding us. And I think that when we realize that, we'll also realize how important it is to us. That it's not something we're just taking from, but we are actually part of it and we are living with it. And that it is protecting us and it is providing us with everything that we need to have a healthy and a happy life. And that is just something as simple as realizing that our everything that surrounds us is living, and it has power. And this is the knowledge that my community has taught my generation, my aunt's generation. And we need to put that out to the world to know how we view the world, and how by viewing the world in that way we have been able to protect our forests, how this has influenced in my community, risking everything to protect our lands, our territories, despite the persecution and the threats and the tortures that happened to my community. They have kept fighting exactly because they know how important it is. They know how important it is to take care of our children, but they also know how important it is to take care of what is around us, because we are nothing without what is around us. Yeah.
Okay, great. Were you complete, Helena? I didn't know if you were. Okay, great. Thank you so much for that very powerful conclusion. We're coming up to the top of the hour. We're going to close the call. First and foremost, I want to deeply thank all of the presenters for taking so much time with us and sharing incredible knowledge from the Brazilian and Ecuadorian Amazon. Our solidarity is with you, our hearts, our spirit, our prayers are with you, are sending funding to you from all the people here online and many different collective organizations. There are petitions we're going to be sharing to support this pushback against the governments that are creating much more oppressive situations and challenging situations for indigenous peoples in Brazil and in Ecuador in different ways. This is an ongoing fight, and as I was saying earlier, you know, the conditions of the pandemic are just further amplifying colonization, patriarchy, capitalism. A lot of these systems of oppression that have already been in place are now being exacerbated, and we really need to stand by our sisters and brothers in the Amazon. This is the lungs of the planet, and the knowledge from our indigenous sisters, as you can hear today, is quite profound. There's so much more I know each of them could share. But I know for WeCan, we are very dedicated to indigenous rights, very dedicated to forests. I think that Catherine has put our Women for Forest program in the chat, so you can learn more about how we are working to protect forest, which means protecting the rights of indigenous peoples, defending the defenders of the land, and also a lot of the work around divestment that we're doing to stop deforestation and to stop the money flow to all of this exploitive and extractive industries that we're facing right now. And we will continue to work with our allies at Amazon Watch and many others, Rainforest Action Network. There's many, many allies working to protect these very sacred regions of forests in the Amazon. And I think that, you know, we really need to understand that this is an urgent time, and this is a time to jump all in. It's not a time to wait on the sidelines. Everything is needing attention now, and it can seem really overwhelming. So I would just suggest for people that, you know, you do your own self-care practices. We first need to care for ourselves, our family, and feel that we can attend to ourselves and ensure that our own immediate community is cared for. But it is also time for us to reach out and realize the great need of indigenous peoples all over the world. And today specifically, we're talking about the Amazon, but we need to be big enough to be able to help each other. So it's really vital that we do a lot of follow-up. Be sure to know that the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network are going to be sharing these petitions. sharing these calls to action, sharing these links, but also going forward, really linking in collaboration with other organizations, because we need to get big enough to really assert our authority and power. And one of the things that we're going to be doing, which our organization is a part of, is the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature. And we're now actually preparing a case using rights of nature, which some of you can look at. And Catherine, if you could put a link to Rights of Nature on our website there in the chat. We are actually going to be creating a case to present the violations against Indigenous peoples, violations against the rights of nature, to support the Living Forest Declaration, to support the Amazon rainforest, so that in a year's time, we will be able to have a tribunal in which we will be able to really present a lot of these different issues that many of the women have talked about today in an international setting, where we can really look at the rights of nature, look at the rights of Indigenous people, look at the rights of land defenders, and say this is a time to stand up for the Amazon. So we're doing a lot of research to prepare for that tribunal. And we'll make sure that, again, in the document at the end, that we will share with you how to also be in touch with this International Rights of Nature Tribunal, where we want to put on the international stage this movement to protect the Amazon rainforest and to stand up for Indigenous people of these territories. So with that, I want to, again, just thank everyone. I wish everyone so much good health, so much well-being in your own personal space, and in your own lands, in your own communities, and know that we are going to continue to have this conversation going forward on WeCan, to be able to have more dialogues on other topics coming up. And we welcome you to join us, to join our newsletter to find out about that. But mostly, I just want to thank again Sônia and Maria for translating, Daiara, Patty, and Helena for your incredible strength and wisdom. And we deeply appreciate your time. And we send everyone our love and deep respect and love to all. And maybe we could just open up the lines for folks to say goodbye to each other, and greetings from all over the world. We've had people from literally all over the world on this call. Thank you.
Blessings to everyone. Great blessings.
Thank you so much.
Love.
And thank you.